Hey guys, welcome to this week's live. Before we start, I just want to say at this time of day, all of the animals in our area are barking and meowing and lawnmowers are going off, so I'm so sorry for all of the background noise that's going on right now. I'm just going to be inviting our guests. I just saw that they came on. One second. I hope that worked. Let's see if they... Hi!
Hello. Hi.
Hey, thank you so much for coming on live with me.
No problem. I just want to turn it up a little bit.
Love sound.
Yep.
Hello, everyone.
Hiya.
I was just going to say, I'm so sorry for any background noise. I think all the cats and dogs in the area, anyway.
That's okay. All good.
So everyone, this is Tash and Bella.
Hello.
Going to be joining me today to talk about all things occupational therapy and Ready Rocket Science. Ready Rocket Resources.
Ready Rocket Resources. There's a little bit of science to it, so we're excited to talk about it.
Yeah, I'm a little sick at the moment, so
No.
forgive me. While everyone's joining in, I just wanted to say that anyone can ask questions at any time, and you guys feel free to answer any that you see that pop up. You guys can see that, can't you?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Awesome. And while everyone's joining us, I'm gonna debunk some myths. I do this every week with every guest, and it was very hard to find some myths about OTs, I guess.
You did well.
I found you. So the first one was occupational therapists only work in hospitals.
So that is, we're going to debunk that myth because that is a lie. So when we're looking at OTs working in hospitals, particularly we might be looking at equipment prescription or falls prevention or helping people to return home safely. But I guess the area that we work in is a little bit different.
Yeah, so we're both paediatric OTs, so we work very much in the community. And so the children we work with them either in their homes or in their schools, or sometimes come to our clinics, or sometimes just out in the community at the park or somewhere like that. And so obviously for a child that we're working with, and the goals that they're working on, it's very much about their everyday life. And so we're going to be working in lots of different environments, and definitely not only in a hospital.
Yeah, that was interesting that I read that one, because I've only ever experienced it in the home or clinic or something like that. So I thought I was going to introduce.
Thinking back to uni days, I think working in a hospital is bread and butter OT.
Definitely.
And so I think when I first started my degree, I know everyone was like, oh, I want to work in a hospital. And then I was like, oh, I couldn't think of anything worse.
No, very much in, so particularly my interest is working at schools and at home and in the community. But I think for us, the reason why we turn to love OT so much is because, especially working with young children, when we're looking at their occupations, we're looking at their ability to take care of themselves, their ability to learn, and their ability to play and make friends. And so that sort of brings in a little bit of our personality into our jobs, that it's such a rewarding, it's a positive environment, it's a tricky environment, but it's also a really rewarding environment for us. Mm-hmm. So yeah, myth debunked. Definitely OTs work in a range of different areas.
So what I'll do now, just quickly, I think most people have joined already, but I'm it up to you to introduce yourselves and what Ready Rocket Resources is. About that.
No, all good. Yeah, happy to introduce ourselves. So,
yeah.
Tash, do you want to go first?
Sure. So I'm Tash O'Connor. So I'm a senior paediatric OT. And have always worked in paediatrics as long as I've been an OT. And I work predominantly in a private practice based in Perth, Western Australia.
And I'm Bella Martini, so I'm a senior OT as well. I work with children. I did work a little bit in aged care, some locums, but majority of my career has been working with little people. And I am working in my own practice in Perth, Western Australia.
And then I guess we both came together kind of at the start of the pandemic, really, wasn't it? And we both noticed that there was a big gap. So there was rising wait lists for families was a huge part of it, and also COVID impacting a lot of therapy continuity for families. And we were like, what can we do to help these families access support that they might be otherwise unable to access? Mm-hmm. And we were like, we want to be able to provide something that families can use at home. And so we came up with the concept of Ready Rocket resources with our plans to be able to provide accessible resources for families to use in their own home with their children, either while they're waiting for therapy because they're on a wait list, or alongside their usual therapy, or for some families it might be all they need. They might not need to see a therapist after doing this.
And so for us, it was really about packing as much as we could from our experience working with children to provide, you know, those real strategies, like what sort of things can you be doing at home to help your child, you know, manage some pretty big emotions, or manage the array of different emotions that they experience through the day. So I'm just looking at the books right now, which we'll talk a little bit about later, but yeah, we're just really proud about what we've been able to create so far, and we're very thankful that there are platforms like you, Jess, where we can chat with parents, because I think that's how we're going to become better as clinicians, is really reaching out and making sure that the resources and therapy that we provide to kids are really reflect, you know, the values of the families that we work with. So
yeah, I think that's awesome. And I think especially during COVID, I think we all you know, I think especially during COVID, I had a lot of questions sent to me. I don't know why I get all the questions, because I'm like, I'm not an expert in anything, but I guess people are looking for that type of support, and that's awesome that I can refer them on to you guys now. But I think your resources are amazing, and they will help people, because I've already had so many messages about just in general, like emotions and all of that. And a lot of, you know, people that just don't know what to do and need some kind of direction or strategies. So it's awesome that you've created that resource to have at home, especially if there's long wait lists and not an ability to access OT physical support. So that's awesome.
Yeah. But hats off to you as well, Jess.
Yeah.
I think that you are an expert in terms of from that parent perspective. And I can see that there's a lot of people joining this chat right now. And they're joining because they like to listen to what you're able to say as well. So good on you.
Oh, thank you. And the main reason I wanted to make these lives is because I'm not an expert, like professionally in different fields, and I thought, why not bring people in that can answer the questions, and you know, instead of me just going, oh, you know, ask your OT or ask your speech therapist.
Definitely.
But so it's really awesome to have you guys here.
Thank you for having us.
We might go ahead and start with the questions. I'm not sure if any questions pop up already.
I think I may have seen one pop up around stimming, but maybe we'll start with these questions and then we can go back.
Okay. Yeah. So basically, what is occupational therapy, and how can it help my autistic child?
Sure. So occupational therapy, or our role as an OT, is basically to help any individual, but for our line of work and for today's discussion, children, to do what they need to be able to do in their everyday life. So whether that's to be able to do it with independence, or just be able to participate to the level that they can do, and that is what their family is wanting. And so I guess when we think of children, and because that's the other part, to break down actually the words occupational therapy, you say the word occupation and people think job, right? Career. That is one area of OT you can go into, but not us. But really, in all sense, an occupation is actually any activity that you do. So literally having a drink of water is an occupation. Tying your shoes is an occupation. Writing down in the classroom is an occupation. So when we think about the occupations of children, we are looking at all of those different things across their day. So I guess you can kind of break it down into three main sections. So you've got your kind of self-care or self-maintainer type occupations. So being able to do things like dressing and toileting and showering and brushing your hair and tying your shoelaces, all of those sorts of things that are included in that role. Then we have a child's role as a learner at school is a huge part of their childhood. So being able to participate in the classroom, being able to follow instructions, being able to attend to tasks, and then the skills required to participate in those school-based activities. So a huge one is handwriting, obviously, and then, you know, going into gross motor activities as well, and sporting games, and the social aspects as well. What have I missed, Bella?
No, I think you've got everything, but I think it ties into all of these different things that the child wants to do, and other things that the family wants the child to do. How are they going in terms of their independence for their development, and what are the skills that we can be teaching the child to build up that independence so that they're able to participate in all these things during their day.
And so I guess when your question was, how can I help my autistic child? It's really about that child and that family, and what are your goals and priorities at that moment. And, you know, goals and priorities can fluctuate, absolutely. And you might work on one thing for a while, or you might work on several things at a time, or just depending on the family and what their priorities for their child are.
Wonderful. And the next question was, is therapy burnout real? Is it okay to take a break?
This is a really tricky one. So when you sent this through, I think we want to first say that we don't know your child, and so all of the people that are watching today, we don't know your child individually, but we definitely think that there is such thing as therapy burnout. I guess in our experience, we've noticed that children might be accessing a number of therapy sessions during their week with a number of different service providers, and we do start to see that sort of lack of motivation, and I guess that, you know, not wanting to be going to the sessions and not wanting to be engaging in the tasks. And so I think that from our clinical perspective, we do think that it is real, but then to judge it and to say when you should stop or when you should take a little break, that's really up to the family and the service provider and what sort of goals you're working on.
Absolutely. And I think then, so yes, absolutely, it is okay to take a break. I know that a lot of OTs working with this population of children and their work closely with families, and a lot of our role is that kind of parent coaching role in supporting those families to work with their children at home as well. And so, you know, there's that period of consolidation of skills, and you know, even if we decided to kind of take a short break from therapy, that doesn't mean you're going to stop completely everything that you've been doing. From my experience, like for example, I see lots of kids at school, so we often naturally take a school holiday break because we can't go to the schools in the school holiday, or sometimes it's a nice opportunity to catch up with the families during that school holiday break and just review goals and see how things are tracking along and make any changes that are required. And also, like, a large part of my role, and I know your role too, Bella, is that parent coaching. And so what it might look like as well, you know, you might take a break from like direct face-to-face therapy, but instead of seeing the child, you might be working with the parent and having phone calls or Zoom chats or whatever it might be to target different goals. So I think part one is, yes, absolutely, we do think therapy burnout is real, and I think it absolutely is okay to take a break, but obviously it depends highly on the individual child, their family, their goals, and also the therapist and your therapy provider and their model of practice. I know some clinics work in blocks of therapy, others just continue on, and you know, it's kind of got to work for everybody, I guess. But yeah, it is a tricky one without knowing the exact situation.
Yeah. Going to say that like a lot of questions come through individualized, and you know, you can't know everything unless you've actually worked with them, so it'll be answered in a general way. But I know with Jacob, he's very much a routine guy, so we do keep the sessions going.
Sure.
It's almost like it's a good kind of thing in school holidays for him to keep going, because he gets really dysregulated in school holidays, and to keep doing the same is awesome.
Yeah.
I just saw someone say they just bought the book. So amazing. Love your work. That's awesome.
Oh, thank you. Oh, that's lovely. Thank you so much.
The next question was, any tips on how to help kids to use utensils? My daughter is trying but gets very frustrated when she can't use them.
Okay, so again, quite a specific one, and without seeing your daughter, it's tricky to comment, but I guess we would be unpacking, like, what is going on for your daughter in that moment. Is it the underlying skills of using the utensils? Is it, you know, related to her strength or her coordination? What sort of utensils are you hoping for her to use? Can we adapt those utensils at all? Can we get built up cutlery or whatever it might be? Can we change the weight? Can we change the size? And what else did we say, Bella?
Yeah, so I think that when we're looking at this, it's around, well, for us as a therapist, stepping back and observing the whole situation. And so I think for me, I'm wondering, okay, let's look, you know, to sit up at the table, is that a tricky skill for that child? And so do they need to develop their postural muscles and that core strength? Because that can be impacting their ability to have really precise fine motor control. The other thing that you've sort of touched on, Tash, is around that hand strength and coordination. You know, is it really tricky to maintain that grasp? Is it really tricky to coordinate the scoop or, you know, whatever the utensil might be? Is it hard to stab the food with the fork to then bring to your mouth? And what can we do? So exactly what Tash just said, are we, when it comes to postural strength and being able to sit upright at the table, are we providing seated support? Are we trialing some different equipment which gives more support for them to focus on that task? Are we building up that cutlery, like Tash said? Are we practicing those skills in other environments? So when it comes to utensils, we would be focusing on that at the table, but that's quite a pressured environment. Can we also, you know, play, what are some of the games?
Can we do scooping kinetic sand with a spoon and tipping it into a cup, or, you know, pretend play, all of that sort of stuff. And like you said, away from that meal time when that might already be a stressful time for that child. The other part of it was that you reflected that your child's feeling frustrated at that time. So absolutely validating that emotion for her and understanding and helping her to label that and say, yeah, I can see that is frustrating for you. Like, what can we do to make this easier? Grading the task if you can. So, you know, maybe it's like taking turns with the parent, your turn, my turn, or even some hand over hand support if that's going to work for your child. I love getting the parent's hand on the spoon and the child's hand helping is often a nice way to do it as well. But making sure as well, like, you're not pushing it too.
Oh, we've just cut out.
You know, offering.
Did that just cut out? Sorry.
Did we cut out?
Just like 2 seconds, I think.
Okay, that's all good. I'm just going to be right back.
Okay. So making sure that we are giving that kind of just right challenge and not pressuring too much or pushing too much where she's just going to lose interest altogether.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that you said that because I know with Jacob, it's not, as a parent, you think, you know, my autistic child, he likes to run around a lot. So he never really sits down to eat, like unless he eats like 2 seconds off again. And I've never actually thought about like posture and everything like that. So it's definitely like shows that you need a professional to come in and watch your child and, you know, assess them. And it's definitely something that's been brought up with Jacob's OT. And so I just like had this big realization of like, oh yeah, like that's why. So yeah, it's definitely.
Absolutely. And there's just so many different skills involved that's worth looking into and making sure that's not the barrier to what you're trying to achieve.
Yeah. Someone said my son is so much like Jacob. He's verbal, but only for singing, and when he likes, but not for talking to people. Yeah, Jacob's a singer. We'll go on to the next question, maybe. My child. Oh, sorry. Yes, this is probably a very similar question to the last one, but it says my child gives up very easily when a task seems too hard for him. Any advice? Probably very similar, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, again, just making sure to validate those emotions that he might be feeling in that time and recognizing that that is challenging for him at that moment. And then using strategies to try to grade that task as much as possible and make sure that it is that kind of just right challenge for him. So making sure that it's not a task that's too hard and not achievable for him in that moment, and offering the amount of support that is going to allow him to have some success without making it too hard and more overwhelming that he's likely to give up on.
Yeah.
Did you add anything to that one, Bella? We were just doing this one here.
I'm sure that you've got it. I'm not too sure what you talked about.
The next question was, do occupational therapists diagnose sensory processing disorder?
So this is a really interesting one, and it's a label, if you want to say that I've come across more and more recently. So sensory processing disorder is actually not a recognised medical diagnosis at this stage. I've definitely seen it come up in reports, and I've seen OTs use it as a description of a condition, I guess you could say, but it's not recognised like in the diagnostic manual that we relate to. OTs in general, for that cannot diagnose any medical diagnoses, but we can absolutely make observations and comment on our observations and how that might be impacting the child. So while people are using the label of sensory processing disorder, I guess what they're referring to is just that child having sensory processing difficulties. So we absolutely would then look at what's going on for that child in that time. We would do assessment, we'd do observation and chatting to the parent and finding out what is impacting their daily life and how can we help to make life for them easier or more comfortable or whatever might be happening for that individual child.
Confusing when people say the word disorder because it
is confusing. Yeah, absolutely. And I think sorry, you go. You cut out a bit.
It comes up a lot, and I think a lot of people are like, how do I find out about that? And so
and I think it's interesting as well because definitely something that has changed recently is that now sensory difficulties are part of the diagnostic criteria for autism, whereas previously they weren't. That's not to say that every child with autism is going to have sensory processing difficulties, but then also children with sensory processing difficulties don't necessarily have autism. So it makes me wonder if one day it might become a standalone diagnosis. Because I definitely think there are children out there that's their, that's a separate thing for them. But yeah, it's an interesting one, and it is tricky when you see it kind of floating around and you're like, oh, well, is this something that my child can be diagnosed with? But so to clarify that one, currently it's not a diagnosis that's recognised, but that's not to say it won't be one day.
Yeah, I think it opened a whole new world with that initial, I had an initial assessment with Jacob, and that was the first assessment we've ever done, and it was with a speech therapist, but she talked about sensory processing, and it really was like that explains so much. Like she just every single thing, every had an answer for everything that we said, and I was just like, oh, I need to find out more about this. And then I just delve into research that and pretty much everything that you guys know about, obviously, but
I think that's also what I've experienced too. I think that when I am conducting a sensory assessment, being the sensory profile with a family, and they start to say that this is really tricky and this is really tricky, and then I might say, and what about haircuts? And then just that relief of the parent being oh, you understand what I'm going through. So while we can do the sensory profile, I think we're constantly linking it back to function and meeting their sensory needs safely, so that we can maximize engagement in the task, as we've talked about before.
Awesome. No comments. Sorry, I'm just scrolling. Oh my gosh, haircuts. I think a lot of people.
I see. Oh my god, IMG haircuts. Yes, we understand.
Yeah. Jacob doesn't do haircuts, but we try and do a little snip here when he falls asleep. But that's all we've gotten. Toothbrushing has gotten. The next. Sorry, my thing keeps falling down. Tips on how to regulate my 4-year-old. Oh, help! I wrote that wrong. Sorry. Help my regulate when he's feeling overwhelmed. I guess that's very. You have to, it's very generalized, I guess.
No, but I think that when we're talking, and something that I see as an OT, when I am looking through the NDIS plans for very little people, and the goal is for self-regulation, I think, and I guess for us with this journey going through the development of this resource, I've learned so much around, what is expected for a child developmentally in terms of regulating their emotions, and are we expecting self-regulation at this age? So I think to answer that question, I think it's important to acknowledge that for that child who is 4 years old, they're still at that co-regulation stage. They still need mum and dad to help, or they still need an adult to help them through pretty strong emotions. In our book, we talk a little bit about what that feels like. So we have within the story that we have our galactic goggles. And so Tash is going to get some pictures up. So the galactic goggles help us to find, you can see there. So our galactic goggles help us to find out how we're feeling. But when we are feeling those really big emotions and we start to have that meltdown, that almost like that disassociation, we talk about how, you want to bring it closer, our galactic goggles become fogged up. And so we're talking about how we're not actually able to, in that moment, process information or problem solve really complex things for that little child, for that little body, I mean. So in those moments, what we want to be doing is providing that safe space for co-regulation. And so in that safe space, we're talking about providing that physical comfort. We talk about reducing other sensory input. We just talked about sensory processing, but can we dim the lights? Can we reduce the other audio that's happening, you know, in the space? And then can we reduce the verbal input from us?
So rather than, you know, sitting there and going, what's wrong, what's happened, what can you do, how are you feeling, all of that in that moment that your child probably can't process at that time, it's really limiting that and barely saying anything at all, and those really basic comforting phrases, it's okay, you're safe, I'm here, and then just supporting your child to calm down in that moment until their goggles are a little bit more clear, and that's when you can have that conversation around, you know, what happened, how are you feeling in that moment, if that's something that your child is able to do, and unpacking it from there.
I think that's so cool that you've created that kind of like visual way to think about it, because I think when you first hear about it, you're like, like you're a little confused about how like that could be affecting them so much, but like having, that's like a clear understanding of how that would affect them, because I just remember like going through, like, I think when Jacob was around 2 or 3, lots of sensory meltdowns, and that has reduced over time because we've kind of realized those sensory triggers. I just remember someone telling me like, you need to like do less. And it was just like a big realization as well. Like, you try so hard to do things for them, and you're like, do you want this? Do you want that? And it's just like, can be too much for some kids. And that's the analogy. I think that's so cool.
And I think also when children are going through those feelings where, you know, when your galactic goggles are fogged up and then they become clear, and then you start to process your surroundings, and then you're not sure what actually happened when your galactic goggles were fogged up, then the child starts to feel those guilt, shame, embarrassment. You know, did I do something wrong? What did I do? I don't know what I did in that moment. So I think that through talking about it through the story, it normalizes that this is a natural stage of children processing really big emotions, so that we're talking about how, you know, throughout time and through practice, we're going to be able to work towards self-regulation. But, you know, sometimes these things happen, and it normalizes it for the child.
The other thing that we've included in our book as well at the back is some suggestions of reflections with your child. So some kind of like sentence starters of at that time, after they've calmed down, their goggles are clear again, if they have the capacity to chat and say, you know, well, what are you feeling now? And what did you notice in your body when you felt that? And having those reflections at that later stage. So we've got some ideas on things that you can chat to your child about if they have the capacity to.
That's awesome. That's so cool. Sorry. The next question is 7. Does every autistic child require occupational therapy?
So I think that one is, again, obviously very dependent on the child. So I think my answer is probably going to be no, not necessarily every autistic child requires OT. I think it depends highly on goals, priority areas, what that child may or may not be having difficulty with, and what that family needs in that moment. And I think absolutely it can change throughout their childhood as well. There might be periods where they need an intensive block of OT or you know, some catch-ups or just parent coaching, and then they might be good to go on their way for a little bit and they might come back. And I think it just definitely fluctuates and depending on that individual child and their goals for what they want to be able to do.
Do you find that like a lot more, I don't know if this is just my understanding, but a lot more younger children require it more than like later, or is that like not a thing?
I think that there's a real emphasis on early intervention. And so it might be seen that there are more OTs working in the early intervention space just because I think prior to NDIS funding, there was a real emphasis around, okay, 0 to 7 or 0 to 8, that's where we're going to do as much therapy as we can, sort of thing. Which we know now, obviously, with NDIS, we're looking at every year across the lifespan for people, supporting different people. So I think that moving forward, I think that OTs are really starting to break out into just across the lifespan. Would you say
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think, again, you know, a lot of the time when it is that earlier intervention, it is a lot of that parent coaching and that guidance for parents on how best to support their children through those different early developmental stages. Also huge, like a lot of my role is in school-based support and working closely with teachers to support them in the classroom. So I think that kind of school age is a really big one too. But then even like, you know, heading for teenagehood and then that transition to high school and then that transition to the workforce one day. And I guess, you know, we can probably look at those kind of big transition points of life. Is when you're mostly requiring that support on a very general level. But yeah, I think definitely you're probably right in saying that most families would seek it most at that kind of early intervention, younger stage as they're kind of starting that journey. And then depending on how they go with those transitions, whether they need more support or not is kind of up to the individual family.
Yeah. I guess like when you diagnosis, you get the recommendations and then that's where, you know, so just sort of question. Did a question pop up like down below? I've gone somewhere. No. Okay.
Let's have a look.
There's like a way to ask.
Oh, I don't think I can.
I don't think we can scroll.
I don't think we can scroll on our end.
I think there was one like right at the beginning about stimming, maybe I saw pop up.
Let's go all the way back. Sorry. How to control the stimming? Why do they do that? Maybe.
Yeah. Okay. So stimming is an interesting one, and I think it's very, very individual for every person with autism. It can look like a lot of different things, but to my understanding, it's just often a repeated action or activity that is done that helps that individual to regulate, to feel calm, to be able to feel comfortable in their environment. Sometimes it's done at like more high stress moments of the day, but sometimes it's just done kind of more consistently throughout the day, and that's just a way that they feel comfortable. The question was around how to control it. So I guess like I would be number one wondering what the stim was and know it, like wanting to know like are they safe doing that stim? Is it something that other people are noticing and kind of unpacking like what would be your reason for wanting to control that? And then I guess unpacking it further, if we felt like it was something that was you know, we wanted to try and change, you could look at trying to adapt it and give them something that was similar, that might give them that same sensory need that they may have in that moment.
So with like, for example, something that's very common is like hand flapping. And so I have worked with a number of families that, you know, for whatever reason, and it's totally valid for them to feel that way, but they would not like their child to hand flap. And so then we're looking at, okay, well, what is the child seeking in that moment? And is it related to their visual system? Are they looking at their fingers? are they wanting to experience more visual input during their day? So it's a real unpacking of that stim to then look at how can we substitute it. But we don't typically say to stop, because that is something the child innately, needs to do.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I just there's a lot of.
I think you posted recently about stimming. Did you?
Did I?
Does Jacob engage in any stimming or?
Yes, yeah, he's yeah. Mostly he does hand flapping a lot when he's happy.
Okay.
Mostly vocal stems though. And to be honest, we have gone through a period where he was doing some dangerous ones, like hitting his head on walls and things. And that's where, like, when people approach me and they message me, like, I get a lot of messages about wanting to stop stimming and things like that. And I'm very careful about what I say, but I'm always like open about how when they're dangerous or they're affecting some kind of part of their life, I think then there is a reason to provide an alternate. Like we provided Jacob an alternate. He stopped that stim, but he got it in another way, and
yes,
they need that. I don't know if Jacob needed to headbutt, but he needed something to regulate himself, and he couldn't figure that out on his own. So we figured that out for him, and I just feel like it kind of breaks my heart when people say things like, "Oh, it's embarrassing," or "I don't want them to do that." And it breaks my heart, because it's literally like them just wanting to regulate themselves. And I do understand where they come from, but I also, it breaks my heart.
I think someone else just mentioned when he gets excited, he jumps and flaps his hands. So I think that when you're talking about that's a way of him regulating, that's really lovely that he is showing that excitement. And then how can we help with that verbal expression as well? Or can we clap our hands? Can we get that input in a different way? But yes, I agree with you. Yeah.
I think that, like, a sensory diet really plays into that. So, like, I didn't even know what that was when I started, but like when we do more sensory activities with Jacob and he's got more swings in the house, he's got more sensory toys and things, the lesser the dangerous ones and the ones that were harmful came about. I just think that they have needs, and they need to do that in some way. And so I might skip the last one. I didn't know how you.
Oh yeah, sure, it's fine.
I thought it was an odd question. Do you know what virtual autism is?
To be honest, it's not something that we had come across. We did have to do some research, so we didn't have a lot to say.
Okay.
From our research, it sounds like it's something that's been described fairly recently, so maybe something that might be emerging, but not something that either of us has come across so far.
Okay, then maybe we won't talk about it. So
yeah.
And then what I wanted to do at the end of this live was hand it over to you guys. I know you've talked about the resource a lot, but if you wanted to talk about the resource or anything that you'd like to share.
Sure.
Yeah.
Excellent. Did you want to
So I guess we've talked, like we said, we've talked about it quite a bit, but no, we're just really excited, and we'd be keen for everyone's feedback as well, because it is something that is developing for us. But no, we're very excited about, and we've had some really lovely feedback from families as well as therapists who are also utilising particularly the strategies in their therapy sessions, which is nice to know. But I think overall for us, it has been a really important part to acknowledge that children go through emotions and different emotions throughout the day really quickly. It's constantly things are happening in their environment that impact on the way that they feel. And so for us, we wanted to present a way, I guess, like a framework for them to see that, I travel to all of the different planets in the galaxy during my day. And then the last part of differentiation for us was that we wanted to acknowledge that, the internal needs of the child is really important for regulation. If I don't feel right on the inside, how am I going to be able to regulate myself or learn to regulate my emotions? So we have a planet that is designated to the internal needs of the child called Planet Zonk, and that's about if we're busting to go to the toilet, or if we're too hot or too cold, or if we're hungry or tired or sick. You know, our rocket isn't running to its maximum. So that means that we're going to need to meet the internal needs. We're going to need to go to the toilet, or make ourselves feel better, or eat something, so that we can then power on during our day. So, no, we're very excited about this resource.
I don't think we super went into the strategies before. So basically, our storybook is the way to teach your child, and the idea is that the parents and the children sit down to read it together, probably quite a few times to understand all the concepts. And it's the idea that you travel between the planets, and the different planets represent your kind of arousal levels or your levels of energy throughout the day, and acknowledging that, you know, some of the emotions that we feel are when our rocket or our body is moving more slowly, and right up to planet crash when we're moving really, really fast. And then we have the idea of the fact that we can either power up or power down our rocket depending on what we need to do during our day. And so our charging challenges, so we've got all these different activities in our charging challenge book to try at home. And the idea is that they are there to either power up or power down. We don't specify which, because we believe that for every child it can potentially be different. But our activities are sorted into 4 different kind of categories. So we've got a section on like identifying emotions and being able to label those emotions. Then we go on to a whole bunch of breathing activities. I've had so many kids, you say, take a deep breath, and they're like, I don't know what that is, or that's boring. So we've got lots of fun ways to do deep breathing. Then we've got a section on whole body activities. So all those moving, big muscle moving activities, which are often the real motivating ones. And then a section all around cognitive-based activities. So those real thinking strategies, kind of those mindfulness type ideas that we cover. And then the other part, because this is technically a 3-part pack, is that when you make a purchase, or anyone can, we've got a free download on our website, which is your child's activity tracker. And so the idea is that it lists all of the different charging challenges in this book, and it gives your child a way to tick them off as they try them, and then also like rate them and keep a record of like, oh, that one was really great, I'm going to give it 5 stars, or actually that one wasn't for me. And we're recognizing that the fact that all children are different, and for some of them they might find some of these activities great, and some of them just maybe be like, I didn't like that at all, and that's fine. And being able to recognize that and give that child that power to recognize their preferred strategies that might be useful during their day.
And we also, I can see that there's a message, I'm from India, so can I get the book here in Amazon? So that's definitely something that we are working on at the moment, to have our books on Amazon for purchase. So
watch your space.
Watch your space. Sorry.
I think there's a delay, and then I'm like talking, and then sorry.
Yeah.
I was just gonna say, I will put up a story with your account, so if anyone wants to follow you, you can follow up here, I think.
Right.
You want to follow your page? Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
So good.
Did I interrupted you?
No. I think we're all finished, but no, we're very excited about these books, and like you said, you put the link up, but if you'd like to follow along, we're on Instagram at Ready Rocket Resources.
And then our website is www.readyrocketresources.com, which is where you can get your copy of our books and download those free downloads as well.
I was going to say, most people rewatch this live after it's live. So if any questions, I'm sure they would be very happy to answer them down below.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. Send them on through.
Thank you so much for being on live with me and answering everything. OTs.
Thank you so much.
Valuable resources.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having us on. It's been really great to chat to you, and hopefully and see all the different people that have been following. So it's really exciting for us as well. And yeah, we just hope that lots of different families can get something out of our chat today, and potentially something out of our resources.
Yeah, definitely. I definitely think that you will get a lot of traction, because you've done an amazing job.
Thank you so much.
Bye, everyone.
All right. Hope you're feeling better as well soon.
All right.
See ya.
Bye.
Okay, bye.
See ya.